Good morning, y'all. We've made it through February, and this is the February recap video. Not only is February the shortest month, but this year it seemed to just fly by, at least from my perspective, whereas January seemed to take forever. February seemed to move very quickly. And there hasn't been that much development. It's pretty much just planning ahead, getting excited for things going on this year, germinating a few seeds, and yeah, just looking forward to what's coming and planning and trying to figure out an ideal kind of action plan and way forward. There's a certain element of faith and just going with the flow of things, and I embrace and appreciate that. Kind of like being in the void space from day to day, moment to moment. But in the larger sense of the trajectory of things, I like to kind of like set the trajectory. So, for example, the overall trajectory here is to create an off-grid sustainable foundation, basically. And so, from day to day, it's kind of like just going with the flow of whatever it seems resonant for that day. But in the longer sense, there's like planning aspects of like what is the whole goal for this season, for this year, or what is the primary objective, or what are the priorities. All this requires kind of reflection and planning, and I enjoy all that kind of stuff, and requires minimal effort, just focus, whereas a lot of the building can be exhaustive. And one of the benefits is that if the actual physical work, isn't ideally oriented towards the priorities, it's like the work becomes more exhausting. But if it's ideally oriented towards what is a priority and what is exciting, the work itself isn't exhausting. It can actually be exciting or regenerative. So it requires that kind of introspection and planning and kind of that focal diligence, I guess, to set the trajectory, to course correct when things go wrong, and then otherwise to just be at peace and to coast along the way, basically, and filling in whatever gaps come and following whatever excitement seems to arise. So that's pretty much all about here, I guess. There's like nothing that has really gone on. The weather is slowly warming, and winter is slowly wrapping up, and by the end of March we'll be into spring, which will be great. So this is the last monthly recap video of a winter month, though most of this next month will still be winter because the season flips on the 21st at the equinox. So I think most of what I'm going to talk about, or the rest of what I'm going to talk about in this video, is about Russia and Ukraine and the war going on there. There have been a couple requests from people in Allodium that would like to hear more of my perspective about that. And in the last video, I said, I think it was like last Tuesday, so a week ago, which was basically the day after Russia recognized the Donetsk and Lugansk, and then it was that day, or before I'd fully digested that, they basically went and invaded they struck many different parts of the country and invaded different parts of the country of Ukraine. And I'll start out with what I think that Russia is getting at, what I think their real intent is here. So they recognize Donetsk and Lugansk as, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, I've seen the names enough, but I don't actually say it. So the Donbass region, those two, I don't know, districts in the region. I don't know exactly how you would say that, but those are the two provinces or districts or regions in the Donbass region. I don't know. But essentially, so there's those two that make up Donbass. Donetsk and Lugansk are like the Donbass, and there might be more in the Donbass. I'm not quite exactly sure. Anyways, so what I think that the plan of Russia is to first recognize the Donetsk and Lugansk, and then probably at some point incorporate them into Russia in the same way that happened with Ukraine, via a referendum from the people, assuming that's what is wanted. And so both regions, the Donetsk and Lugansk, of the Donbass, they were basically split in two. So the Ukrainian, there's basically a front, a war front, a line of contact between the separatists and the Ukrainians, and it basically split the two in two. So for Russia to recognize each, the Donetsk and Lugansk, they have to then decide, are they only going to recognize them within the current bounds of the line of control which we are able to enforce, or are we going to recognize them independently within their entire region, essentially? And this makes this is most applicable to Lugansk, as far as I understand. I think that's the southern one, and Donetsk is the upper one, but I might be wrong. But it might be Donetsk, but basically the one that's closer to that borders the Sea of Azov, which is the little sea which is just north of the Black Sea, and to the right of Ukraine, to the east of Ukraine. So basically, if Russia, or if the whole Donbass region, and so if Donetsk and Lugansk are both fully independent, then Ukraine will lose access to the Sea of Azov, and then they'll be landlocked other than Odessa. So that's the only thing I don't really know at this point, is whether or not Russia is going to actually try for Odessa, but we shall see. So basically, there's two outcomes that I see as likely: either that Russia ends up pushing all the way up to the Dnieper River. I think that's what it's called. I could be wrong, but the river that Kiev is on. It's a really big river, and it's thick, and it kind of divides Ukraine into east and west. So either Russia will kind of like invade up to there, and then kind of separate Ukraine into two, an east and a west Ukraine, and the east would still be separate from those other regions, or they're just intending to, just like Putin said, which pretty much you can pretty much always take Putin at his word, just following through history. There's lots of politicians who do the opposite of what they say, but if you look through history at the things that Putin says and the things that he does, he follows through on what he does. So he's a man of his word to that degree. So if you listen to what Putin says, their goal is to denazify and demilitarize, while recognizing those two regions. So I expect that's exactly what's going to happen, that they're going to do their best to drive the Ukrainian military out of the Donbass region, and then defend the ethnic Russians. And what happens in with the rest of the Ukraine, I think it's a matter of how hard the West pushes Russia. So they think that the strongest possible defense and deterrence is to take the strongest position. But the whole conflict is actually a result of that, of not understanding Russia's red lines for their security, in order to draw them into war via Ukraine. And so Obama, in his first terms, he was always trying to isolate Russia and create war with Russia. So Syria, that whole debacle was under Obama, and then everything going on in Ukraine is all under Obama. So, and Obama's a puppet, of course, but the masters who Obama serves, they want Ukraine to basically just be a tool to undermine Russia. And also, we're seeing this happening right after what happened in Kazakhstan, and I don't know if that was influenced Putin's choice in this. I think it probably did, but it's a much different model. What happened in Kazakhstan versus what the empire does to destabilize countries versus what Russia has done. So the examples for what Russia is doing, you can look to Syria and Libya and Georgia and Ukraine for what Russia is doing. So Russia tends to defend Christians. It defends its national interests and its people, and those seem to be its primary. There's the interest of the state. There's the interest of the Orthodox Church there, and the whole Ukrainian country is primarily Christian. But the empire has basically created a new Orthodox Church. They split the Orthodox Russian or the Greek Russian Orthodox, I don't know, the Christian Orthodox Church. Then they made a new one that the head patriarch is in Ukraine versus Russia. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Kind of like how the Chinese made like a new Dalai Lama. They're like, we've got the Dalai Lama. We don't accept your Dalai Lama. So that's what I expect. I don't think they're intending to invade and occupy Ukraine like the U.S. has done in different countries. I just think that they intend to make a tactical strike in order to, or you could call it a whole, I don't know if war is the right word. I don't think peacekeeping is necessarily the right word, but demilitarization and denazification seems like the right word. And the reason why what they're doing is denazification, when a lot of the Western media smears Putin as a Nazi or something, is that there's actually Nazis in Ukraine. There's a lot of Nazis in Ukraine and also in Germany. Most of the Nazis in Ukraine are in Western Ukraine. But the fighting battalions, the nationalist and Azov battalions, are mostly fighting in the war zone areas. In Kharkov, I think, is the I forget which one is north and which one is south of Lugansk and Donetsk. But anyways, that radical right ideology, lack of tolerance, and everything, that's very dangerous. We saw what the Nazis did in the last World War, and Putin and Russia, the Soviets, were the main ones to stand up to the Nazis and to stop their advances. And the Soviets were the allies of the Western forces up until the end of the war, essentially. Well, the Soviets signed an alliance with Hitler, a non-aggression pact, and then Hitler backstabbed them, and then Soviets took on most of the brunt of the Germans, and then were allied. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. But then once the Germans were defeated, then the Soviets became the new enemy, and of course, Hitler was funded by these same globalist bankers and everything from the start to build his whole war machine. So, anyways, there's lots of video propaganda going around. There's history which is tied up in all of it. A lot of people aren't interested in the history. A lot of people are just interested in what's going on now, sensationalist stuff. And it's a standoff, really. It's a standoff, as far as I can tell. It's a standoff between Russia currently and the Empire. But Russia has some allies, and the Empire is in a financially precarious situation and is potentially overextended. And so Russia standing up to the Empire, this could be the beginning of the end of the Empire, but it kind of largely depends upon whether Russia's allies pull through for Russia or not, because it's in Iran's interest, certainly, to take this somewhat greater leverage position that they have and make the most of it. For example, if they blockaded the Gulf of the Persian Gulf now, it would be a much bigger effect on the empire nations economically than it would be at pretty much any other time. So it makes sense that Iran would want to stand up as well and stand against the empire. But for China's kind of like the balls all go into China's court, because with the West and Russia fighting each other, then China is left alone to just thrive economically, which is what they're best at. And there were some pushes to focus on China, pivot towards focusing the forces against China, but basically it puts China in the power seat, where if they do nothing, they benefit because their economy is growing, as the Russians and the Western forces are are engaged in conflict, or if China wants to do the coup de grace and attack economically the West, then they're in the position and everything to be able to do that. And the West has basically just military to threaten them with for the most part, because China has inroads into the media in a greater way than apparently Russia does, because Russia is facing a unified opposition from the left and the right, and there's very little support for what Russia is doing. I don't know any Russians, and while I said in the last video that I support what they're doing, like, I'm not like, that's like ideologically. I support ideologically what they're doing, and also from the perspective of Allodium. For Allodium to be a self-declared, autonomous, sovereign state, the trend of other powers recognizing independent, autonomous states is a positive one. So for Russia to recognize the Donetsk and Lugansk, their right of autonomy and self-rule, declaration of their allegiances, all that sort of stuff, as opposed to just being dominated by Ukraine, that's in alignment with Allodium as well, because the more recognition and acknowledgement of independent, small, micro-sovereign states, the more decentralized power and everything, political power will be, and the better it will be for everyone. So I see what I don't intend to like materially support anything that Russia's doing, but in ideologically, from my perspective and from the perspective of Allodium, it makes sense that what they're doing is in their own national interest. It's a kind of ideologically in alignment with the Orthodox Church and defending their people from these nationalist, neo-Nazi battalions, as well as just subjugation to the Western Empire. And one other interesting thing is in Ukraine, the population dynamics on the West, they're all what is called kind of Ukrainian, and they speak Ukrainian, whereas in the east of the Dnieper, is that the right word, of the river? The river that Kiev is on is primarily Russian speaking in Russian. So on one level, it would kind of make sense if East and West Ukraine were split, and the West was like Ukrainian, and the East was like a Russian part of or Russian version of Ukraine or whatever, the Russian speaking kind of Russian aligned version. So I see that as kind of a potential, and that's where the uncertainty lies for me. I don't think Russia would attempt at all to invade or occupy the Western Ukraine, where there's a majority of Ukrainians, but I do think that they intend to defend their people. And so and then the third option is kind of like a continuation of what's been going on. So the way that Crimea led into the Donbass aspect, there could be a similar stepping stone where they declare, Russia makes tactical advances, and maybe like Kharkov and a couple other provinces, they get a front line there. They push the Ukrainians in the west out of Donetsk and Lugansk. So that is, for all intents and purposes, incorporated into the Russian Federation. And then there can be a period of peace until maybe the next two provinces do a similar thing. But I don't think that's really I think, like, strategically from a defense perspective for Russia, it makes most sense for them to hold that river and also the Sea of Azov, so to extend their security kind of barrier, and so maybe they'll demilitarize and de-weaponize East Ukraine, so that becomes like their buffer zone, and then to the west, NATO, and then and also from the Sea of Azov, so that there's less infringement upon in the Black Sea as well, into kind of Russia's kind of sphere of influence, as opposed to the West's. So opinions aside, I mean, my opinion doesn't really matter about this, and yet I think it's important to communicate and for people to share their perspectives. But ultimately, it's largely detached from probably anyone listening to this, other than the economic consequences of what happens. One thing that's interesting, I've been playing this game called Anti-Yoi, which is a very simple strategy game, kind of like chess, like a 2D board-based game, but instead of squares, there's like hexagons or octagons. And it used to be a game called Slay, and now there's a game called Anti-Yoi, Anti-Yoi. And there's an online anti-UI, so you can play the game online against other people. And so that game, it's like the best strategy game that's simple, like a board game, kind of like chess or something that I'm aware of and I play occasionally. And I learned that it is located in Kharkov, which is one of the northeastern regions of Ukraine, right on Russia's border, where there have been lots of battles, basically, with Russia. And so it's affected me that way. That's the only really direct effect, is this game that I play is somehow affected because their servers are in a war zone, essentially. But otherwise, it's just kind of looking ahead at there's so much food produced in Ukraine, and there's so much energy produced in Russia, as well as metals, that these events are bound to affect the global economy going forward. And we're already seeing all this inflation and record food prices, basically. And so as the record food prices increase, then that'll cause all sorts of destabilizations, like the Arab Spring was largely brought about by increasing food prices. So we're going to see destabilization throughout the whole world this year, basically, connected to all of these economic situations. And I don't know what else to say, but if I just compare the Ukrainian regime was installed in 2014 via a violent coup where many people were murdered, and it was a Western organized coup. So it's like, it makes complete sense why the conflict is all going on now. You got to understand a bit of history, just like it makes sense why Iran hates the U.S., because the U.S. went in and got rid of their democratically elected leader and then installed a tyrant, just like you're going to see in Ukraine. So you're going to see what the West is going to do is they're going to squeeze the people of Ukraine and instill fear into the people of Ukraine, but then scapegoat Russia as the enemy in order to get the people of Ukraine to hate Russia and to react and fight against Russia and all this sort of stuff. So if the empire can get Ukrainians fighting against Russians in a protracted war, they win. If Russia can, in short order, secure the areas that are loyal to them and that want to be part of them, while also securing their existing areas and reduce their kind of their liability exposure via armed forces, but also via the consequences of their actions economically throughout the world. If the faster that Russia can wrap up the operation, the better for them, and the longer it lasts, the worse for them. So for the Ukrainians, so it's best for the empire for an extracted conflict. It's best for Russia to wrap it up as soon as possible and to achieve their ends. But what's best for the Ukrainian people themselves? I guess that's what we should address last in this video. And it's hard to know. I mean, most Ukrainians, they just want, I would assume, they want peace and stability and to thrive in their lives. So it'll be best for them for a quick resolution as well. But with nothing being done, it's probably, well, I don't know. And that's the whole point of centralized things and like choosing from outside. Like, I don't know, but the people should have the ability to choose of themselves. The problem is the way that the media influences the people. A lot of people end up with these ideas which are completely false because they've been brainwashed by the media. They're not interested in looking into the history and understanding, going back a decade or two or more, to understand the roots of all of these issues. Like the Azov region goes all the way, and the Donbass region is like the home of the Cossacks, which goes back like centuries, and they're integral in Russia even being the federation that it is now. And even that goes back to the Mongols, who basically first kind of carved out that empire, which then had a big influence on Russia, and in many ways the Mongol Empire kind of morphed into the Soviet Union. In many ways, it's very similar regions, and it's a long time separating, but the various cultures, the continental cultures versus the maritime cultures. So the Germans have their own kind of culture. The Turks have their own culture. The Persians, the post or the whole kind of I don't know. So there's so much complexity that goes into trying to understand the issues, where what the media will portray is the most shallow surface thing in order to create a reaction from someone, in order to manipulate the people, because that's their whole goal. That's why money is poured into media, is in order to manipulate the minds of the people. And so in relation to the whole conflict, I try to get sources that are balanced. I try to see the empire sources, and then I try to see the sources which are more aligned with maybe Russia, and then and by comparing and contrasting the two, and then you can try to see where the independent sources are, like who lies kind of in the middle, or where the truth lies. So ultimately, it doesn't make that big of a difference whether any of us support what Russia is doing or not. And yet also, everyone's perspective is important, and communicating and the truth and everything is important. So that's why I'm talking about this, even though it's not really that relevant to revealing, or relevant, I don't know, to Allodium and to myself and to anyone else in relation to watching this video. But we'll all be impacted by the economic aspect of it. But otherwise, it's kind of moot whether we think we support Russia or Ukraine. We don't really know. We've just gotten some degree of information from these propaganda outlets or the internet or whatever. And so probably the healthiest thing for any of us is to not be emotionally engaged in it, to not really worry about it, but to still be educated and to learn from the lessons that are available in the past and the present, so that we can create a better future. I think that's the end of this transmission, this video recap update, even though there wasn't much to recap or update, and I just talked about Russia a lot. But I will do a forecast looking forward. So where March is this big kind of mucky transition month. I'm really looking forward to it getting warmer and transitioning into another productive season, and everything externally continues to destabilize at an accelerating rate. And it's hard for people to understand the timelines of how these things happen, because we've seen a destabilization happening for decades, but it increases exponentially over a long decade type time frame. So as these events are happening, it's important to understand that we might not reach a crescendo of the economic situation for a couple years, and yet as it continues to get bad, if we haven't redirected our trajectory into something that's preparing for the ultimate outcome, if we're just trying to react to the changes in the economy as it continues getting worse, we're going to get basically like plowed under, run over. Like, we won't be able to rise above the conflict. But if we can notice the trends now and plan ahead for what's going to happen in the future trends, like for example the dollar losing its value, the supply shortages, the the system basically failing. If we're just trying to react to the failing system, we're going to be part of that mob who's all doing the same thing. But if we pre-prepared for that, we can withdraw from that chaos and then represent a node or a foundation of peace and stability and prosperity and security, so that the conflict doesn't reach here. So that's kind of what I expect at some point. It's like the relative difference between the normal or neo-normal, whatever, and the reality here. When that imbalance causes this reality to be much more attractive than the other reality, that's when this reality will kind of thrive in relation to community and to other people. And in the meantime, like when I first moved here, I moved out of the comforts of a regular house and heat and showers and water and electricity and no bugs and all of the kind of comforts that we take for granted, usually just having a house. And then living up here is moving into the first room is a big sacrifice, a much lower quality of life. So I made that sacrifice 8 years ago, and now it's getting to the point where it's close to even. The comfort and quality of life here still isn't quite as good as a normal person. There's still not like regular hot showers. There is hot water. There's other issues with laundry, perhaps, or it's just not quite like it's not quite to that level. But as the quality of life here is improving, the quality of life in the external system is decreasing. So at some point, and it could be this year, they'll pass each other, and then that will cause the momentum increase of the services able to be provided here and in other localities in relation to other people. And so I've seen it a couple times in the winter, like maybe the power goes out from like a winter storm, and I didn't even realize it, but I hear it from someone else, like, oh, the power's out and we're having to do all these things because the power's out. It's like, well, I wouldn't have known if you wouldn't have said anything, because here we're all on solar. And I haven't had to use any backup. I haven't had to use the gas generator for backup in like, I think 4 years or something. So the solar here gets through the winter as well. And we have the Starlink internet satellite thing powered off of the solar, so that there's high-speed internet connected to satellites. Even if the whole grid goes down, as long as the Starlink grid is up, we'll still be connected here. And that's about the end of this video. There's a pineapple, maybe you can see it, pineapple right here, which it's a little baby pineapple, but that's the third or fourth one that I've harvested here. And overall, in the time I've been here, and pretty soon, I've been waiting for that pineapple. It's going to be so sweet. And that's going to wrap up this February recap update video. And I'll talk to you next month as a Allodium recap if I don't make a video before then. But I imagine I will, at how fast everything is going. But from the last video, when I bought that Bitcoin Cash, when it was like under 280 or something, it's already up to like 330 or something. So that was a good call. And it's definitely possible that Bitcoin Cash finds a new bottom. But that would only come as the economy has some big tumultuous things. And right now we're going to see a cycle of the West try to bolster its economy, try to act real strong and tough, and to isolate Russia. But it's all part of a cycle, and probably within a month or two you're probably going to see the inverse of the cycle, where the ones that were trying to act all strong and tough are all of a sudden being like, oh yeah, we're going to cancel all these things. And turns out Russia, well, we'll see what all happens. Predicting the future is a fool's errand, and preparing for the future is not. But to prepare, one has to have a certain degree of prediction, and it's better to just look at the trends as they are and to see what the trends are leading to and to prepare for those trends, versus actually trying to predict the future. But just you're actually responding to the present trends, and then just kind of what's the word? Not forecasting, but projecting, I guess. Projecting those trends to continue. So if you're going to be investing or making a bet or something, you want to be putting your value in something that has demonstrated that it deserves that value, as opposed to something completely unproven. I suppose I could relate that to Allodium, but I'm not really interested in investors. I'm mostly just interested in creating the reality of it, and that will be the underlying value, which other people at some point will want to invest in. But until then, I will just keep living at a lower quality of life and investing into the foundation. And at some point, it'll all flip. But that's all for today. Hope you're all doing well.